Welcome back to That Dad Guy. Today is September 28th, 2023, and Canada Post issued a new stamp today, so I wanted to show it to you, talk about it, give you some history behind it, and maybe you've already seen it online, maybe you haven't, maybe this is your first time exposed to the new issue stamp, and if you're tuning in and finding it out through me, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you who have taken the time to subscribe, leaving positive comments and sharing. So if you haven't done that already, feel free to do it. But today we are talking about truth and reconciliation. So why are we talking about truth and reconciliation? Well, on September 30th, that is Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. And what does that mean? Well, if we go back to 2021, that was the very first Truth and Reconciliation Day we had. Then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made it a national holiday in order to make sure we learn from history that there was an atrocity that had been committed in residential schools, and we're going to go back and talk about residential schools and what those were all about and how long we've had them and go into all of that. But the bodies of many children were found at some of these schools, and there was a formal apology that went out in 2008 by then Prime Minister Stephen Harper about things that had happened during residential schools. And so Trudeau in 2021 created a national holiday where we could reflect on things that have happened in the past to make sure that we don't repeat them again going forward. There was a grassroots organization within the Indigenous community to wear orange shirts on the 30th as well, for Every Child Matters. And so let's go back in time right now and talk about, I'm going to flip to some notes here I have, about residential schools. So why do we have them? So you can go all the way back to New France, which is what part of Canada was called when the French had a colony here. They did have Indigenous schools, but they weren't mandatory at the time because the Indigenous people here were also helping the French fight a war with the British, and they wanted to make sure that they were on their side. We had something called the excuse me, and I'm going to have this little tickle, it's going to continue for me, but we had the Indian Act come through in 1876. Now, one of the things that had in the Indian Act was that there was going to be schooling for the Indigenous people. Now, the Indigenous leaders at the time were hoping for something that would teach their children how to be able to interact with European settlers that were coming here to North America and be able to trade goods with them and establish a working relationship. That was kind of their hope for what these schools would all be about. With the passing of that act in 1876, the very first, as we know, residential school started in 1881. Their idea of what should happen in those schools was very much different from what the Indigenous people had hoped for. What they did really was they tore their children from the families, separated siblings because schools were mostly divided by gender. They cut young boys and girls' hair, and especially in the Indigenous communities of some cultures, the chopping of men's hair down was kind of an outrage. That was done. They were given European names because of they thought it was too hard to pronounce the names they had, or all sorts of things that way. They were basically fed low quality food, very little of it. They were given a 50-50 work day, so 50% of the time they were in school and 50% of the time they were working. That's helped keep the cost of the schools down, as if the children could help do repairs or gardening or farming or washing, cleaning, doing the floors. They did that sort of stuff. Now, they were also combined with religious teachings. They were trying to give them a Christian base, and so of the a fifth of the schools that were created during that time, 3/5 of them were Catholic, 1/5 were Anglican, and the final percentage were Presbyterian and United were run these schools. One of the things that had happened during that period, 150,000 children went through between 1881 and the last school closed in 1996. That is hard to believe that there was still a residential school within my lifetime, when you think of all the things that were going on. Also, that I had no idea going through school and stuff that this was going on, because it wasn't something we were taught about. So it didn't really come into light until after the last one closed. The last one did close in 1996, but there was one residential school that wasn't federally funded, went on for one more year after that too. So really the last date for Indigenous whitewashing, if you want to call it, went right until 1997. 150,000 kids went through, and they estimate over 6,000 of them died from diseases, malnutrition, and many of the bodies were buried right there at the schools. So stripped away from their families, never to be seen from again. A lot of them too did not have holiday breaks, so they were away from their families for years and years. It wasn't until about the 1960s that they allowed to have breaks where they could go back and be with their families. So the early years, there wasn't a lot of hope that the kids would come back, and then when they did come back, they weren't the same by any stretch of the imagination. I want to read one of the people that went through the residential schools, her account as of 1972, and she says, in 1886, at the age of 12 years old, I was lassoed, roped, and taken to the government school in Lebret. 6 months after I enrolled, I discovered to my chagrin that I had lost my name and had an English name and had been tagged onto me in exchange. It was said, when you were brought here, the school interpreter later told me, for the purpose of enrollment, you were asked to give your name, and when you did, the principal remarked that there were no letters in the alphabet to spell this little heathen's name, and no civilized tongue could pronounce it, was the quote. We are going to civilize him. We are going to give him a civilized name, and that is how you acquire this brand new white man's name. In keeping with the promise to civilize a little pagan, they went to work and cut off my braids, which incidentally, according to the Assiniboine traditional customs, was a token of mourning. The closer the relative, the closer the cut. After my haircut, I wondered in silence if my mother had died, as they cut my hair close to the scalp. I looked in the mirror to see what I looked like. A Halloween pumpkin stared back at me, and that it did. If it was civilization, I didn't want any part of it. I ran away from the school, but I was captured and brought back. I made 2 more attempts, but with no better luck. Realizing there was no escape, I resigned myself to the task of learning the 3 R's. Visualize yourself, the difficulties encountered by an Indian boy who had never seen the inside of a house, who had lived in buffalo skin teepees in winter and summer, and who grew up with a bow and arrow. This was Daniel Kennedy, who was a former student of the residential schools. So it kind of gives you an idea what one person's experience, but many more had similar experiences going through. They say the tasks that were separated by gender, girls were responsible for housekeeping, cooking, cleaning, laundry, and sewing, while boys were involved in carpentry, construction, general maintenance, and agricultural labor. Funding was a pressing concern in the residential school systems from the 1890s until the 1950s. The government tried constantly to shift the burden of the system to the churches and onto the students, who later contributed to financially helping the schools. By the 1940s, it was clear to many that half-day systems had failed to provide residential students with adequate education and training. However, the half-day system was not eliminated until the 1950s, when more funding became available owing to a stronger economy. Excuse me. So here is just an average day for one of these young pupils. They get up at 5:30. At 6 o'clock, they have chapel, religious service. From 6:30 to 7:15, they have bed making, washing, milking, and pumping. Inspection of pupils goes from 7:15 to 7:30. Inspected pupils in their school rooms to see if they're clean, properly dressed, their condition, health, note being taken for requiring attention. If clothes, this is done by sister directly after dinner. 7:30, they have breakfast. At 8 o'clock, they have fatigue or chores for small boys. That goes from 8 to 9. The younger boys, or the older boys, go to trade work from 8 o'clock. From 9 to 12, they have school with 15-minute recess. And that school may be religious studies, or it might be European history or Canadian history as time goes on. From 12 to 12:10, they have to prepare for dinner, lunch. From 12:10 to 12:40, they have lunch. From 12:40 to 2 o'clock, there's a recreation period. From 2 to 4, they're back in school and doing more trade work. From 4:45 to 6 o'clock, they have fatigue chores again, such as milking, carrying coal, ashes, filling tank, wood boxes, pumping, and sweeping. From 6 to 6:10, they prepare for supper. From 6:10 to 6:40, they have supper. From 6:40 to 8 o'clock, they have recreation again, and then 8 o'clock, it's prayer time and retire to bed before doing it all over again the next day. They did this 6 days a week. On Sunday, there was no school, but there was religious studies on that day. And like I said, they didn't get to go home until the 1960s, that there was a break in the action on that too. So this is why we're talking about truth and reconciliation today. Last year, in 2022, it was the first time Canada Post put out stamps to commemorate the day. So I'm going to throw those 4 stamps up here. They were artwork that was done by Indigenous creative people to talk about different messages. And this year, they put out this booklet. And there's the story. And inside, they have 4 of the residential schools. So on the back, it says, this second issue of the Truth and Reconciliation series was created in collaboration with the Survivors Circle of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. Canada Post's goal is to amplify the voices and experiences of survivors as they share the truth. Throughout Canada's history, at least 150,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children were taken from their families and sent to residential schools in an act of genocide. The children were stripped of their languages, culture, spiritual traditions, and subjected to malnutrition and disease, as well as psychological, physical, spiritual, sexual, and emotional abuse. Thousands of children never returned home. So in these images, you have Kamloops, BC, residential school, Île-à-la-Croix in Saskatchewan, Sept-Îles in Quebec, and one in Nunavik, Northwest Territories. So 8 stamps in a booklet. Orange, typical, very fitting color for the booklet to be. And it says a lot. So on the 30th of September, that is the day to remember. That is the day for others to celebrate their culture in Indigenous ways. There are time slots being given on radio stations and newspapers and all sorts of form of media. You may see people's Facebook profile pictures going to orange or to a Indigenous feather. Yeah, it's a very powerful day for some really horrible history that isn't ancient history either when you think of the last school closing in 1996. So I know not a super uplifting video, one that I wanted to talk about, one I wanted to show these stamps for, but I wanted to give some context behind the stamps too. There is a lot more. If you go into residential school information, you can read all about it. You can read stories. Yeah, I'm not going to gloss over that there have been bad things that have happened in history, that's for sure. But I did want to talk about it. Excuse me. The other thing I was going to talk about today, I'm going to touch on it briefly, just to lighten the mood a little bit here at the end, but I acquired this box of stamps that was partially sorted. There is some Canadian used stamps in there. There is a big pack of Canadian used, what was labeled as foreign, some US stamps. There are some souvenir stamps in there too. I've gone through all of the Canadian. I put them aside, gone through. I figured in another video what I will do is I'll show you all the new stamps that are in there that I can use for post-crossing. There are some really interesting ones that have come out of there too that I want to talk about. I'm hesitant about talking about it today because then I'll go down a rabbit hole and show you some other stuff. And I want this to be more about truth and reconciliation. So I'm just going to leave that as a teaser. I am going to come back and do another video on it. It might be a supplementary one this weekend where where Truth and Reconciliation falls on the weekend. Monday is going to be a federal holiday, so there won't be any mail going out that day. So Monday might be a great day for me to show you what was in that box and some of those surprises that I found that really intrigued me. So keep a lookout for that. Friday, I always have my post-crossing video come out. Saturday, I am answering your questions on That Dad Guy Answers. And then on Sunday, I am usually post-crossing again and showing what I'm sending out. It is World Postcard Day on this Sunday, so more postcards are going to be going out for sure on that day. So a lot of things coming up. I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was very informative for you. If you're a stamp collector, you might want to have these in your collection. If you are a Canadian citizen and you're doing post-crossing, you might want to put some of these stamps on your postcards, what have you. Maybe you're an international stamp collector and you just want to make your collection complete. You can do that too with these issues and order them right from Canada Post. Well, that is it for now. There are some other news and milestones going on. We will talk about those later because I'm not taking away from what we have today. So have yourself a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?